The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good morning to you with the news at this time. I am Tiana Jordan. The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. A Brazilian company has been selected to construct the first leg of the Linden to Latham Highway. Guyana's service commissions may be appointed by this month end when a new opposition leader is expected to be in place. And in regional news, in Antigua, the government is offering a 1-month amnesty to foreigners who are in the country illegally. For the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. The construction of the first link of the Linden to Latham Highway has moved one step closer to commencement, with the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, clearing the way for negotiations to start with a Brazilian company. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh said the CDB on Thursday issued its no objection for negotiations to commence with the most responsive bidder, Construtora Queiroz Galvão S.A. from Brazil, for the award of the Linden to Mabura Hill upgrade project. The cost is $190 million. The Linden to Mabura project will see the upgrading of its existing alignment to asphaltic concrete at a cost of 122 kilometers, as well as the inclusion of 5 drainage structures. The Finance Ministry explained that the process leading to the award of that contract followed a stringent and transparent procurement process. After a thorough evaluation process involving engagements and consultations with the Caribbean Development Bank, consultant Matt MacDonald, and other specialists, the bid by Construtora Queiroz Galvão S.A. was determined as the most responsive bid. This indicates that bid fully complies with all environmental, social, health, and safety requirements. The CDB indicated its concurrence with the recommendation of the Guyanese Evaluation Committee and issued it no objection to commence negotiations with the winning bidder. This project will be the largest project ever funded by the Caribbean Development Bank and one of the most historic projects undertaken in Guyana. The opposition of Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU plus AFC, says that billions of dollars worth of contracts are being awarded to blacklisted companies. APNU plus AFC parliamentarian David Patterson says although the Public Procurement Commission had barred several companies, contracts had been awarded to a number of companies.
Sir, despite being banned by the Public Procurement Commission, two contracts were awarded by the Central Housing and Planning Authorities, one of $890 million, sir, and one, sir, from Region 9 of $30 million, sir, to Vidalib. They're a blacklisted company, Vidalib. Additionally, contracts were awarded. They just awarded a contract for Milo. A Milo falls to China Railway Forest Group. Blacklisted companies are blacklisted for fraudulent practices.
The APNU plus AFC parliamentarian is also accusing the government of awarding contracts to close associates such as Queen's Atlantic. The Guyana government says it is conducting detailed studies of the yellowtail well before approving a field development plan. This announcement was made by Natural Resources Minister Vikram Bharat during the ongoing budget debate.
We are in the process of reviewing the field development plan for the fourth development, the yellowtail development, and I want to say that we are not taking things lightly. As a government, we have already engaged 2 different sets of international consultants to ensure that they review the field development plan for yellowtail and to ensure that when a license, once approved, is granted, that it brings additional benefits to the people of Guyana. And there are safeguards in the license to ensure that our environment is protected and to ensure that people actually benefit from the oil and gas sector, Mr. Speaker.
Several environmental activists in Guyana have stated in court papers that an oil spill from yellowtail will affect the chain of Caribbean islands. Vice President Bart Jagdeo says that once a new opposition leader is in place, the government will be ready to establish several constitutional commissions. With Mr. Joseph Harmon having resigned from the post of opposition leader, the People's National Congress reform-led opposition coalition is continuing internal maneuvers for Mr. Aubrey Norton to become a parliamentarian and voted in as opposition leader.
Now we are in the process of electing a new leader of the opposition. So once that person is in place, we anticipate that by the end of February, we should have all of the commissions, the service commissions in place, right? So the president will consult with the leader of the opposition on the Judicial Service Commission and putting it back in place, the Public Service Commission, and the Teaching Service Commission.
He notes that already 4 names have been approved for the appointment of a Police Service Commission, with the next step being a motion to go to the National Assembly for approval. Vice President Jagdeo also remarks that the current internal politics of the coalition proves that then opposition leader Harmon had no real power to make decisions.
You'd recall several times I said that engaging with Mr. Harmon might be an exercise in futility, given that he may not have had a mandate from his party. And we were proven correct, that he never had a mandate from his party, although they had a very disappointed show and Mr. Norton was elected.
Mr. Jagdeo restates that the PNCR's recent internal elections only saw 1/3 of its delegates voting. The government says it wants a number of Guyana's election laws amended before local government elections are held. Vice President Bart Jagdeo says the response to the proposed amendments to the Representation of the People Act. Already, People's National Congress reform leader Aubrey Norton has insisted that Region 4 will not be split up in a revised Representation of the People Act. But Mr. Jagdeo maintains that Region 4 will not be broken into separate electoral districts.
In the last election, so they had the different tallies being done by the East Coast. We had results for the East Coast, East Bank, South Georgetown and North Georgetown because of large numbers. So they were tallying and giving subtotals for each of these 4 areas. All we're saying in the new law, not splitting up Region 4, all we're saying is that you should put, instead of having one RO responsible for the whole region, given the large number of votes, which are like East Coast or South Georgetown has maybe 3-4 times more votes than another region, some smaller regions, then put in separate individuals to run all of these places. So you're not splitting Region 4 up.
He hopes that the amended law will be in place for local government elections.
They will be crucial, we believe, for holding local government elections as a test run, because many of the measures that we are putting in place in that bill could then be implemented in the local government reform, which is greater predictability surrounding selection of people, training, the manuals, publication of the manuals, counting of results, publication of results, all of that.
The government also plans to amend the National Registration Act. The chairman of the Guyana Gold Board, Dr. Goben Ganga, says a system of accountability has been put in place to prevent declaration of Venezuelan gold in Guyana. There has long been speculation that cheaper Venezuelan gold is being smuggled across the border to Guyana, where it is purchased at a lower price and sold to local gold dealers and the Gold Board. But Dr. Ganga says the Gold Board and the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission are working closely to put systems in place so that miners will have to properly account for gold being declared. He says if there is any suspicion, the board will examine factors such as the possible gold output of concessions with actual sales and revenue. At that point, Dr. Ganga says questions will be asked and miners will be asked to prove the source of the gold they are selling. A man who has been charged with possession of ammunition and a firearm and robbery under arms escaped from the Lusignan prison yesterday. Police say that 18-year-old Kevin Singh of School Street Grove, East Bank, Demerara, escaped from the Lusignan prison virtual court compound while attending court. Investigators say that at about 9:30 yesterday, prison officer Danraj uplifted 7 inmates, including Mr. Singh, to attend court at Lusignan prison. Singh and the other inmates were left in the custody of prison officer Rolwayne Payne. Prison officer Payne told police that at about 9:45, Singh, who was foot-cuffed at the time, asked prison officer Payne to use the prisoner washroom, which is situated to the northwestern side of the court compound. Police say that permission was granted and Singh left and went to use the washroom. According to prison officer Payne, he left and went to the court office, leaving the prisoner in the washroom, and upon his return he went to the washroom and discovered Singh missing. Hence, an alarm was raised. Checks were made in the court compound and it was observed that the eastern chain-link fence of the court compound was detached from the post. And now in regional news. The Antigua and Barbuda government has decided to offer a 1-month amnesty to foreigners who are living illegally in that country. The announcement was made by Prime Minister Gaston Browne in his national budget address. He says many private and public sector projects to be implemented in 2022 will require additional labor. If Antigua and Barbuda is to secure the projected 8% growth rate. Mr. Browne says that to ensure that sufficient labor is available domestically, the government will offer an amnesty to individuals living in Antigua and Barbuda whose status is not regularized. The trend over the years show that as that country heads into general elections, the governing Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party and the United Progressive Party take steps to win the votes of foreigners who are residing there. They include Guyanese, Jamaicans, and nationals of Trinidad and Tobago. In the British Virgin Islands, 3rd District Representative Julian Fraser is predicting that Premier Andrew Foy will call an election before it is constitutionally due. The next general election is due early next year, but the veteran legislator said Foy's actions indicate that voters will not have to wait that long. BVI News reports that Mr. Fraser says that based on the things that Premier Foy is doing, he will call a snap election before August. Mr. Fraser says that the last election was February 25, 2019. He argued that political parties were going to start campaigning before the 4-year anniversary of that date. Commenting on the matter, 2nd District Representative and fellow opposition legislator Melvin Turnbull said that opposition members are committed to working together in the best interest of the people of the Virgin Islands, regardless of what this might mean for an election after an election is called. Officials at the Duds prison in Barbados have confirmed a COVID-19 outbreak, with more than 50 inmates and staffers so far testing positive for the virus. But Minister of Home Affairs and Information Wilfred Abrahams said operations at the penal institution have not been significantly affected. Abrahams said that the testing of prison officers who reported for duty earlier in the day resulted in the discovery of 5 cases that do not seem connected to the previous cluster of cases. He said a staff member who works in the prison's kitchen had tested positive for COVID-19, which resulted in the testing of all the associated inmates and staff between January 29th and 31st. From that number, 18 male inmates tested positive on their first test, and a further 26 received positive results on Wednesday from their second test on Tuesday. The Barbadian Home Affairs Minister says that all of the COVID-positive inmates are stable and are isolated in the prison. He says all those who have been in contact with them have been quarantined. Abraham said a decision was made to rapid test Wednesday's incoming shift of prison officers, and 5 positive results have been reported. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. The leaders of Russia and China, who've met for the first time in 2 years in Beijing, say they support each other in foreign policy. China's President Xi Jinping also backed President Putin's call for a halt to NATO expansion as Russia builds up troops on its border with Ukraine. The two leaders met ahead of the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics. The Olympic flame is making its final journey to the opening ceremony after a troubled and controversial build-up. Our correspondent Stephen McDonnell is in Beijing.
Vladimir Putin has been given the red carpet treatment. There are traffic control measures here so that his motorcade can move around the city. And he is one of the few high-profile leaders who'll be there for the opening ceremony. I mean, compared to the 2008 Summer Games, you won't see as many major familiar faces from around the world, including from Western countries.
The French President Emmanuel Macron will travel to Moscow on Monday to meet President Putin as Western leaders try to avoid a major conflict with Russia over Ukraine. Mr. Macron will then hold talks in Kiev with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Hugh Schofield reports from Paris.
The aim is to find ways to de-escalate the crisis over fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. After separate video link conversations with the French president on Thursday, both Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky sounded cautiously positive about the French initiative. Mr. Putin saying that security guarantees for Russia were on the table for discussion, and Mr. Zelensky that it heralded an acceleration of the peace process. With France holding the rotating presidency of the European Union, Mr. Macron is keen for Europe to play a bigger role in the search for a diplomatic solution to the crisis.
Another policy advisor to Britain's embattled Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stepped down, a day after Downing Street was rocked by a series of high-profile resignations. 4 top aides left Mr Johnson's team on Thursday, starting with his head of policy, Munira Mirza, who quit over false claims he made about the opposition leader Keir Starmer in Parliament. 3 senior figures caught up in the row over lockdown-breaking parties stood down shortly afterwards. The Prime Minister's allies say the massive resignations are a sign he's taking charge. Greg Hands is the Energy Minister.
They've resigned and the resignation has been accepted, and Boris Johnson has paid tribute to them for their service. But we will now have a change at number 10 Downing Street in terms of the operation. That is exactly what the Prime Minister announced on Monday.
Scientists in South Africa who've produced a COVID vaccine similar to the Moderna jab say they hope to begin clinical trials at the end of the year. The chief scientist behind the vaccine, Karen Fenner, said locally produced COVID jabs could increase vaccination rates across Africa, which are the lowest in the world. World news from the BBC. The number of people who've died with the coronavirus in India has passed 500,000, the third highest total in the world after the United States and Brazil. The latest official figures say that 41.9 million people have contracted COVID-19 since the pandemic began. Many independent researchers believe the actual number of infections and deaths is much higher because many cases have gone unrecorded. Pakistan says 7 soldiers are now known to have been killed in 2 ambushes by separatists in the southwestern province of Balochistan. The Pakistani army says 13 militants were killed in the separate attacks on army bases in Panjshir and Noshki. Shumaila Jafri reports from Islamabad.
The army says that the attacks have been repelled, but a clearance operation is still underway in Panjgur, where a few militants are holding out. The army also insisted that the militants were encircled by their forces. However, later an official of the Balochistan government claimed that a few militants did manage to sneak out and had disappeared in the city. Pakistan blamed India for the attacks. A press release by the military's PR wing alleged that the intelligence agencies intercepted communication between the attackers and their handlers in Afghanistan and India.
The Sri Lankan president has marked the country's Independence Day with a call for Sri Lankans living abroad to send money home to help deal with the ongoing economic crisis on the island. Gotabaya Rajapaksa invited the millions of expatriate Sri Lankans to invest in their homeland, as Sri Lanka deals with a debt crisis exacerbated by a drastic fall in remittances and tourism numbers, mainly due to COVID. A huge container ship that ran aground close to the German port of Bremerhaven late on Wednesday has been refloated. The Mumbai Maersk was successfully moved by tugs during high tide. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now here's a recap of the leads. A Brazilian company has been selected to construct the first leg of the Linden to Latham Highway. Guyana's service commissions may be appointed by this month end when a new opposition leader is expected to be in place. Regionally, in Antigua, the government is offering a 1-month amnesty to foreigners who are in the country illegally. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.